Regulations and good management practices allow building owners to maintain asbestos-containing materials in place under most circumstances. Whenever these materials are disturbed, additional protective measures must be employed to ensure that workers and building occupants are not exposed to regulated levels of asbestos. This supplement to the asbestos awareness training you have received covers work practices to be used when drilling holes in cement siding that may contain asbestos. While this material is relatively rare, these practices ensure that workers are not exposed to levels of asbestos that exceed the OSHA permissible exposure limit in the event that asbestos-containing siding is encountered and penetrated. As required by regulation, this supplement also includes a hands-on exercise in using the procedure. Prior to receiving this training, you should have received at least 2 hours of asbestos awareness training. Historically, asbestos has been used in various building materials installed in both residential and commercial structures. While occurrence of most of these materials is somewhat limited, especially in structures built since 1980, you should be aware of the potential hazard associated with disturbing them. You should also be aware of work practices that have been developed to protect you in the event that you should encounter a material potentially containing asbestos. As was outlined in your asbestos awareness training, you should never disturb a material that may contain asbestos unless you have proof that the disturbance will not result in exposure to dangerous asbestos fibers. This training specifically addresses drilling holes through asbestos cement exterior siding. Asbestos cement siding, sometimes known by the product trade name Transite, consists of asbestos mixed with a cement binder. The hardened compound forms textured sheets of exterior building material, which is very durable and resistant to the elements. Asbestos cement siding sheets are typically about 1/4 inch thick and gray in color throughout their thickness. The sheets are hard to the touch and not easily scratched. The material is usually nailed or screwed to the building exterior. Asbestos cement siding was commonly used from the 1940s up until the 1970s to obtain a durable exterior finish that was also essentially fireproof. As the material is so durable, much remains in use today, especially in older neighborhoods. Regardless of the type of exterior siding you may encounter, SBC policy is to presume that all siding materials contain asbestos, unless analytical information is available that establishes otherwise. Accordingly, you should use this procedure regardless of siding material you drill through. This procedure only addresses drilling holes through exterior cement siding to mount telephone equipment. You should be clear on what operations are not covered by this supplement. It does not allow unprotected disturbance or removal of a siding or other asbestos-containing materials. If any modification to the siding is required, other than is detailed in this training, additional training and potentially state licensing will be required. If the siding must be disturbed in any way other than is described in this training, you should contact your supervisor and either confirm that the material is not asbestos containing or have the work performed by an approved asbestos contractor. This procedure does not allow cutting the material in any way. You would never want to cut an asbestos product in the manner reflected here, as this would disturb and release the asbestos contained in the material. This procedure addresses drilling holes through asbestos cement board to mount telephone interface equipment on the exterior of a customer building. The equipment typically requires 4 holes or less, approximately 1/4 inch in diameter or less. Improperly disturbing asbestos materials could possibly expose you and others to asbestos fibers. This supplement shows you how to avoid that risk. Persons drilling holes in asbestos cement siding are required to use these work practices when they're not sure that the siding material does not contain asbestos. You may be wondering why you are allowed to drill through an asbestos-containing material at all. We will explain by providing some information on the regulations governing asbestos in the workplace and how the SBC procedure you are being trained on is in compliance with these regulations and ensures your protection. It is SBC policy to comply with all applicable state, federal, and local asbestos regulations. This includes ensuring that you are not exposed to airborne fiber levels above the OSHA permissible exposure limit, or PEL, that was discussed in your asbestos awareness course. This is usually expressed as 1/10 of a fiber per cubic centimeter of air. SBC policy also requires adhering to certain minimum work practices in the regulations. In the event that a representative of a regulatory agency questions you at a work site, inform this person that you're following a procedure that has a negative exposure assessment as permitted by OSHA regulations and state rules. Call your supervisor if you need assistance in handling the matter. In accordance with OSHA regulations, SBC has prepared a negative exposure assessment, commonly referred to as an NEA, for the work practice we will discuss. An NEA documents that exposure to airborne fibers will not exceed the OSHA permissible exposure limit based on recent exposure monitoring results. The work practices for which SBC obtained the NEA must be followed, and the individuals performing the work must be properly trained. So what is an NEA? An NEA is a controlled test of a given procedure performed within the last year on the same given material, asbestos cement siding in this instance. The test is performed using the same types of tools and materials normally used by workers no more qualified to perform the work task than the average person normally performing the task. The NEA is conducted to confirm that airborne concentrations of asbestos will be below the PEL if the procedure is properly performed. For this NEA, SBC conducted tests using asbestos cement siding to determine if airborne fibers could be detected from drilling holes in an exterior environment. These tests produce the air sampling results on which the NEA is based. This photograph shows a worker conducting the procedure using protective gear and air monitoring equipment. This equipment should be used until an initial NEA test is conducted that proves it is not necessary. Air samples were taken with battery-powered pumps and filter cassettes worn by the workers who drilled several sets of holes in asbestos cement siding. In this picture, the pumps are the blue boxes hanging from this worker's belt. The workers also wore respirators and protective clothing, and the tests were done inside an enclosure. These precautions are taken initially because the airborne fiber levels are not known until the air samples are analyzed after the tests. The test results establish that these protective measures are not necessary if the work practices used here are followed. For these tests, the workers used the same type of equipment you used for the procedure. They used a common electric drill with a 3/16-inch masonry drill bit. The tests were based on drilling 30 holes or less in an 8-hour period. Prior to drilling, the area to be drilled was wetted, and upon completion of the drilling, the drill bit was cleaned. No waste was generated during the activity. Results from the test using this method indicated that exposure from drilling small holes in asbestos cement siding will not exceed the permissible exposure limit. Because of these test results, you are not required to wear a respirator or protective suit when drilling into siding, provided you follow the procedure explained in this training course. Now we will provide instruction on the specific steps you are to follow. The procedure for drilling holes in siding consists of these generic steps. Wet the wall where the siding will be drilled. Drill the holes. Wash off the drill bit. Failure to follow these steps is a violation of SBC policy and an OSHA violation. We will now address each step of the process in detail. You will need the following materials to perform this procedure: water, safety glasses, and a drill. These materials were selected because they are required to protect you and the environment. They're also easy to find and use. Water is used to wet the siding before you drill it and to wash off the drill bit. Any bottled water or water from a water cooler will suffice. However, a spray bottle works best if you have one. You will need some type of drill to drill the hole. A masonry bit works best for drilling through cement siding. Finally, OSHA requires that safety glasses be worn during this procedure. Once you have the proper materials, you're ready to perform the procedure. Identify where the holes are required and wet the wall where you will drill the holes. Before continuing with the work, make sure the immediate area is clear of all persons who have not completed the training course. Everyone in the immediate area must be trained on the hazards of asbestos exposure and how to perform the procedure. While wearing safety glasses, drill the holes. When finished drilling all the holes, wash off the drill bit to remove any residual fibers that may be present. As a result of completing this training, you will be what OSHA defines as a competent person for this procedure. It is important to understand that the competent person designation applies to this procedure only. The OSHA definition of a competent person is one who can identify potential health and safety hazards and has authority to take prompt corrective action. For the purposes of this procedure, your duties as a competent person may also include one or more of the items shown here. This portion of the training supplement qualifies you as a competent person only for using this procedure. It is SBC policy that you will treat all siding materials as asbestos containing unless you have specific test data that indicates otherwise. Regulations require that after this presentation, you demonstrate your knowledge of this procedure through what is known as a hands-on exercise. In order to meet regulatory requirements, you should drill through a wall at your training facility using the wet methods described here. If you have any questions regarding the procedure, you should immediately contact your supervisor and/or safety and health manager. After completion of this exercise, you are considered trained to drill holes in asbestos cement siding according to these procedures. You must refresh this training with asbestos awareness annually.